Imagine a machine that looks like a cross between a prehistoric insect and a heavy tank, bristling with rockets and screaming through the air at 200 miles per hour. It's not just a gunship, it's a flying fortress that carries a squad of soldiers directly into the heart of the fire. This is the Mi-24, better known to the West as the Hind. Born from the cold calculation of the Soviet military, it became the most recognizable and feared helicopter in history. Today, we're looking at the Crocodile and why, after 50 years of war, its menacing silhouette still haunts the nightmares of its enemies. The origin of the Mi-24 was born from a radical and controversial idea proposed by Mikhail Mil, the father of Soviet helicopters. In the late 1960s, the world was watching the Americans use Hueys in Vietnam as battlefield taxis. But Mil wanted something more aggressive. He envisioned a flying infantry fighting vehicle, a machine that could not only transport troops but also provide its own heavy fire support. This was a concept the Western world had largely ignored, believing that a transport helicopter was too vulnerable to be a gunship. But the Soviets disagreed, creating a massive, twin-engine behemoth that would change the face of air cavalry forever. The engineering of the Mi-24 was a brutal exercise in compromise and power. To give it the speed and lift required for its dual role, engineers fitted it with two massive Klimov TV3 turboshaft engines, generating over 4,400 horsepower. The fuselage was made of aluminum alloys, but the cockpit was wrapped in heavy steel and titanium plates, capable of shrugging off 12.7 mm machine gun fire. The most striking feature, however, was the double-bubble canopy, two separate armored glass cockpits for the pilot and the gunner, giving the Mi-24 the aggressive, bug-eyed look that earned it the nickname the Crocodile among its crews. What truly separated the Hind from every other helicopter in the world was its cargo cabin. Tucked behind the engines was a space for 8 fully equipped soldiers. This meant a flight of Hinds could clear a landing zone with a storm of rockets, land their troops, and then circle overhead to provide continuous cover fire. No other aircraft in history had ever attempted to combine the roles of a hunter and a carrier so completely. It was a 10-ton monster that defied conventional wisdom, a machine that proved the Soviets were willing to build a jack-of-all-trades that was a master of terror on the front lines. The Mi-24's wings were another masterstroke of aerodynamics. They weren't just there to hold rockets. At high speeds, these short, stubby wings provided up to 25% of the total lift, allowing the Hind to reach speeds of nearly 210 miles per hour. This made it the fastest helicopter in the world for a long time. However, this lift came at a price. The Hind was notoriously difficult to hover, especially in high-altitude environments. It was a machine built for speed and running attacks, a flying shark that had to keep moving to remain lethal, a trait that would define its tactical use in every conflict it entered. Weaponry on the Hind was designed to obliterate anything on the ground. The nose featured a 4-barrel Gatling-style machine gun or, in later versions, a twin 30mm autocannon that could shred light armor in seconds. Under the wings, it carried a terrifying array of rocket pods, bombs, and anti-tank guided missiles. The philosophy was simple: overwhelming violence. A single Mi-24 could deliver the firepower of an entire artillery battery in a matter of seconds. It was designed to be the flying tank that would lead the massive Soviet armored divisions across the plains of Europe, crushing NATO defenses before they could even react. When the Mi-24 officially debuted in the early 1970s, Western intelligence was shocked. They had nothing like it. The AH-1 Cobra was faster and more agile, but it couldn't carry troops. The Huey could carry troops, but it couldn't survive a gunfight. The Hind was a unique, terrifying hybrid that occupied a class of its own. It represented the peak of Soviet industrial might, a rugged, over-engineered predator that was built to survive the harshest conditions on Earth. It was a machine of the Cold War, but it was about to find its true, bloody destiny in the rugged mountains of a place called Afghanistan. The Soviet-Afghan War was the defining chapter in the Mi-24's legend. In the vast, vertical landscapes of the Hindu Kush, the Hind became the Devil's Chariot, a name given to it by the Mujahideen rebels who feared it above all else. For the first several years of the war, the Hind was practically untouchable. It would descend from the peaks like a vengeful god, using its speed and armor to ignore small arms fire while obliterating rebel camps with 80mm rockets. It was the only thing the Mujahideen couldn't fight with traditional guerrilla tactics. The Crocodile was too fast, too tough, and too lethal. Tactical innovation in Afghanistan pushed the Mi-24 to its limits. Pilots developed the circle of death tactic, where several Hinds would circle a target in a continuous loop, ensuring that at least one gunship was always firing. This created a relentless wall of lead and fire that left no room for escape. The Hind was also used for convoy escort, flying low over the dangerous mountain passes to protect Soviet trucks from ambushes. The mere sound of the Hind's heavy rotors was often enough to make the rebels melt away into the caves, proving that the psychological power of the Mi-24 was just as effective as its cannons. However, the introduction of the American-made Stinger missile in 1986 changed the war overnight. Suddenly, the Devil's Chariot was vulnerable. The heat-seeking Stingers could target the Hind's massive engine exhausts, blowing the wings off the machine before the pilots even knew they were targeted. This was a turning point in the history of aerial warfare. To survive, Mi-24 crews had to adapt, installing exhaust mixers to cool the air, flare dispensers to distract the missiles, and even extra internal armor plates. The hunter had become the hunted, and the Stinger phobia began to spread through the Soviet air bases. Life for a Hind pilot in Afghanistan was a relentless test of nerves. They flew multiple sorties a day in extreme heat and thin air, often pushing the engines to the point of failure just to stay aloft. The cockpit was a greenhouse of heat and sweat, filled with the smell of hydraulic fluid and burnt gunpowder. Every landing was a gamble with death, as rebels would wait near the airfields to ambush the slow-moving helicopters. The crews became a hardened elite, developing a deep, almost religious bond with their crocodiles. They knew that if they went down, the Hind's heavy armor was the only thing between them and a brutal fate on the ground. Despite the Stingers, the Mi-24 remained the backbone of the Soviet war effort until the very last day. It performed thousands of medevac missions, saved besieged outposts, and provided the only reliable mobility in a country without roads. The war in Afghanistan proved that the Hind's hybrid design was brilliant in a counterinsurgency role. It was a gunship that could also act as an ambulance and a transport, making it the most versatile tool in the Soviet arsenal. It left the mountains of Afghanistan as a battle-scarred legend, a machine that had proven its ruggedness in one of the most hostile environments on Earth. The end of the Afghan war didn't mean the end of the Hind, it was just the beginning of its global expansion. From the jungles of Nicaragua to the oil fields of Angola, the Mi-24 became the favorite tool of any regime looking for a war in a box. It was exported to over 50 countries, proving to be the AK-47 of helicopters. It didn't need a high-tech hangar or a pristine runway, it just needed fuel and a pilot brave enough to handle its heavy controls. The Devil's Chariot had become a global icon of revolution and suppression, a silhouette that signified that a serious war had arrived. Throughout the 1990s and 2000s, the Mi-24 saw action in almost every major conflict on the planet. In the Iran-Iraq War, Hinds were used in some of the only helicopter-versus-helicopter dogfights in history, facing off against American-made Iranian AH-1 Cobras. The Hinds used their superior speed and heavy machine guns to hunt the Cobras, proving that even a heavy gunship could hold its own in a knife fight in the sky. It was a brutal era of mechanized combat where the Hind's heavy armor allowed it to survive hits that would have sent any other helicopter spiraling into the dirt. In Africa, the Mi-24 earned a reputation as the game changer. In the hands of both government forces and mercenary groups, a single Hind could decide the outcome of an entire civil war. Its ability to appear out of nowhere and deliver massive firepower made it the ultimate tool for shock and awe. From Sierra Leone to the Congo, the sound of the Hind's rotors became synonymous with a decisive strike. It was often the only advanced technology on the battlefield, a relic of the Cold War that still functioned as a futuristic god of war in the eyes of those on the receiving end of its rockets. The evolution of the Hind continued with the Mi-35 and various modernization packages. While the airframe remained the same, the brain of the helicopter was completely rebuilt. Modern versions feature night vision compatibility, thermal imaging sensors, and advanced electronic warfare suites. The old analog Hind was becoming a digital predator. These upgrades allowed the Mi-24 to remain relevant in a world of high-tech missiles and drones, proving that its rugged design was a perfect platform for 21st-century technology. The Crocodile had grown new teeth, and it was ready for the next generation of warfare. One of the most significant upgrades in the Hind's history was the removal of the cargo roll in some specialized versions to save weight and improve agility. However, most operators kept the cabin, recognizing that the battlefield bus concept was still its greatest strength. In modern counter-terrorism operations, the Hind's ability to insert a special forces team and then stay overhead to provide heavy fire is still unmatched by Western gunships like the Apache or the Tiger. The Mi-24 remains a unique bridge between the roles of a transport and an attack helicopter, a hybrid that refuses to be categorized. Protection for the Hind also evolved. Modern versions use laser warning receivers and advanced infrared jammers to counter the Stinger threat that was so lethal in the 80s. The crews now fly with digital maps and helmet-mounted displays, allowing them to target the enemy just by looking at them. But beneath all the screens and sensors, the Mi-24 is still the same iron beast at heart. It still relies on its massive weight and heavy armor to survive, a philosophy of war that prioritizes durability and raw power over stealth and finesse. The global footprint of the Mi-24 is staggering. It has served in the air forces of over 60 nations, from Peru to Vietnam and North Korea. It has become a symbol of military power in the developing world, a machine that is as much about prestige as it is about combat effectiveness. The Hind's longevity is a testament to Mikhail Mill's original vision, a machine that was good enough for everything and too tough to die. It has outlived the country that created it and continues to be built in Russian factories today, a 50-year-old predator that is still hungry for the next fight. The war in Ukraine has brought the Mi-24 back to the center of the world's attention. In a historic irony, Hinds are being used by both sides of the conflict. For the Ukrainian Air Force, the Mi-24 is a vital tool for low-level strikes against Russian columns. The daring raid on the Belgorod oil depot in 2022, where 2 Ukrainian Hinds flew at treetop level deep into Russian territory to strike a strategic target, became an instant classic of aerial warfare. It proved that in the hands of a skilled pilot, the old Crocodile is still capable of pulling off high-stakes, impossible missions. The war in Ukraine is the most dangerous environment the Mi-24 has ever faced. The sky is filled with thousands of manpads, long-range S-300 missiles, and kamikaze drones. To survive, Hind pilots must fly nap-of-the-earth missions, often just feet above the ground, using hills and trees for cover. They use pitch-up rocket attacks, firing their pods into the air at an angle to increase range and avoid flying directly over the enemy. It is a desperate, high-adrenaline form of combat that pushes the Mi-24's 50-year-old airframe to its absolute limit, proving that there is no substitute for armor and a pilot's courage. International aid has also given the Ukrainian Hinds a new lease on life. Countries like the Czech Republic and Poland have donated their Mi-24 fleets, some of which have been upgraded with Western avionics and sensors. This Frankenstein Hind, combining Soviet ruggedness with NATO standard electronics, is a unique weapon on the modern battlefield. It allows Ukraine to keep a significant number of attack helicopters in the air, providing the heavy support needed for their counteroffensives. The Hind has become a symbol of Ukrainian resilience, a machine of the past fighting for the future of the nation. Looking toward the future, the Mi-24 is slowly being phased out in favor of more specialized attack helicopters like the Mi-28 Havoc and the Ka-52 Alligator. These new machines are faster, more agile, and carry even more advanced sensors. However, neither of them can carry a squad of soldiers. The flying IFV concept that made the Hind famous is becoming a thing of the past as militaries move toward more specialized platforms. But the Mi-24 refuses to go quietly. There are still thousands of them in service around the world, and many nations are looking at life extension programs to keep their Hinds flying until the 2040s. The legacy of the Mi-24 is its incredible iconic status. It is the only helicopter in the world that can be recognized by its silhouette alone. It has appeared in more movies, video games, and books than perhaps any other aircraft. From the bad guy in Rambo 3 to the boss fights in Metal Gear Solid, the Hind has become the definitive image of a scary military helicopter. This cultural legacy reflects the machine's real-world impact, a helicopter that looked terrifying because it was terrifying. It was a machine that didn't care about beauty, it only cared about the mission. In the final analysis, the Mi-24 Hind is a magnificent anomaly. It was a tank that wanted to fly and a bus that wanted to be a gunship. It was over-engineered, heavy, and difficult to fly, but it was also indestructible, lethal, and remarkably effective. It proved that a bold idea, no matter how much it defies conventional wisdom, can change the world. As the Crocodile enters its 6th decade of service, its legacy is already written in the dust of 5 continents. It remains the flying tank, the Devil's Chariot, and the most legendary gunship to ever scream across the sky.